Chapter 2 Sectors of the Indian Economy. While I read this chapter for you, I request kindly go through all the tabular information, tables and illustrations for a better understanding. Sectors of economic activities. Let us look at these pictures. You will find that people are engaged in various economic activities. Some of these are activities producing goods, some others are producing services. These activities are happening around us every minute, even as we speak. How do we understand these activities? One way of doing this is to group them or classify them using some important criterion. These groups are also called sectors. There are many activities that are undertaken by directly using natural resources. Take, for example, the cultivation of cotton. It takes place within a crop season. For the growth of the cotton plant, we depend mainly but not entirely on natural factors like rainfall, sunshine and climate. The product of the activity, cotton, is a natural product. Similarly, in the case of an activity like dairy, we are dependent on the biological process of the animals and availability of fodder, etc. The product here, which is milk, also is a natural product. Similarly, minerals and ores are also natural products. When we produce a good by exploiting natural resources, it is an activity of the primary sector. Why primary? This is because it forms the base for all other products that we subsequently make. Since most of the natural products we get are from agriculture, dairy, fishing, forestry, this sector is also called agriculture and related sector. The secondary sector covers activities in which natural products are changed into other forms through ways of manufacturing that we associate with industrial activity. It is the next step after primary. The product is not produced by nature but has to be made, and therefore some process of manufacturing is essential. This could be in a factory, a workshop or at home. For example, using cotton fiber from the plant, we spin yarn and weave cloth. Using sugarcane as a raw material, we make sugar or gur. We convert earth into brick and use bricks to make houses and buildings. Since this sector gradually became associated with the different kinds of industries that came up, it is also called industrial sector. After primary and secondary, there is a third category of activities that falls under tertiary sector and is different from the above two. These are activities that help in the development of primary and secondary sectors. These activities by themselves do not produce a good, but they are an aid or a support for production process. For example, goods that are produced in the primary or secondary sector would need to be transported by trucks or trains and then sold in the wholesale and retail shops. At times, it may be necessary to store these in godowns. We also may need to talk to others over telephone or send letters, which is communication, or borrow money from banks, which is banking, to help production and trade. Transport, storage, communication, banking, trade are some examples of tertiary activities. Since these activities generate services rather than goods, the tertiary sector is also called the service sector. Service sector also includes some essential services that may not directly help in production of goods. For example, we require teachers, doctors, and those who provide personal services such as washermen, barbers, cobblers, lawyers, and people do admire administrative and accounting works. In recent times, certain new services based on information technology such as internet cafe, ATM booths, call centers, software companies, etc. have become important. Comparing the three sectors. The various production activities in the primary, secondary and tertiary sectors produce a very large number of goods and services. Also, the three sectors have a large number of people working in them to produce these goods and services. The next step, therefore, is to see how much goods and services are produced and how many people work in each sector. In an economy, there could be one or more sectors which are dominant in terms of total production and employment, while other sectors are relatively small in size. How do we count the various goods and services and know the total production in each sector? With so many thousands of goods and services produced, you might think this is an impossible task. Not only would the task be enormous, You might also wonder how we can add up cars and computers and nails and furnitures. It won't make sense. You are right in thinking so. To get around this problem, economists suggest that the values of goods and services should be used rather than adding up the actual numbers. For example, if 10,000 kgs of wheat is sold at rupees 20 per kg, the value of wheat will be 2 lakhs. The value of 5,000 coconuts at rupees 15 per coconut will be rupees 75,000. Similarly, the value of goods and services in the three sectors are calculated and then added up. Remember, there is one precaution one has to take. Not every good or service that is produced and sold needs to be counted. It makes sense only to include the final goods and services. Take for instance, a farmer who sells wheat to a flour mill for rupees 20 per kg. The mill grinds the wheat and sells the flour to a biscuit company for rupees 25 a kg. The biscuit company uses the flour and things such as sugar and oil to make 4 packets of biscuits. It sells biscuits in the market to the consumer at rupees 80, that is rupees 20 per packet. The biscuits are the final goods, that is goods that reach the consumers. Why are only final goods and services counted? In contrast to final goods, goods such as wheat and the wheat flour in this example are intermediate goods. Intermediate goods are used up in producing final goods and services. The value of final goods already includes the value of the intermediate goods that are used in making the final good. Hence, the value of rupees 80 for the biscuits, which is the final good, already includes the value of flour, which is rupees 25. Similarly, the value of other intermediate goods which would have been included. To count the value of the flour and wheat separately is therefore not correct, because then we would be counting the value of some same things a number of times. First as wheat, then as flour, and finally as biscuits. The value of final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of sector for that year. And the sum of production in three sectors gives what is called the gross domestic product of a country. It is the value of all final goods and services produced within a country during a particular year. GDP shows how big the economy is. In India, the mammoth task of measuring GDP is undertaken by a central government ministry. This ministry, with the help of various government departments of all the Indian states and union territories, collects information relating to total volume of goods and services and their prices and then estimates the GDP. Historical change in sectors. Generally, it has been noted from the histories of many now developed countries that at initial stages of development, primary sector was the most important sector of the economic activity. As the methods of farming changed and agricultural sector began to prosper, it produced much more food than before. Many people could now take up other activities. There were increasing number of craftspersons and traders. Buying and selling activities increased many times. Besides, there were also transporters, administrators, army, etc. However, at this stage, most of the goods produced were natural products from the primary sector, and the most people were also employed in this sector. Over a long time, more than 100 years, and especially because new methods of manufacturing were introduced, factories came up and started expanding. Those people who had earlier worked on farms now began to work in factories in large numbers. They were forced to do so. As you read in history chapters, people began to use many more goods that were produced in factories at cheap rates. Secondary sector gradually became the most important in total production and employment. Hence, over time, a shift had taken place. This means that the importance of the sectors had changed. In the past 100 years, there has been a further shift from secondary to tertiary sector in developed countries. The service sector has become the most important in terms of total production. Most of the working people are also employed in service sector. This is the general pattern observed in developed countries. What is the total production and employment in the three sectors in India? Over the years, have there been changes similar to the pattern observed for developed countries? We shall see in the next section. Primary, secondary and tertiary sectors in India. Graph 1 shows the production of goods and services in the three sectors. This is shown for 2 years, 1973 to 74 and 2013 to 14. We have used the data for these 2 years because the data are comparable and authentic. You can see how the total production has grown over the 40 years. Rising importance of tertiary sector in production. Over the 40 years between 1973 to 74 and 2013 to 14, while production in all the three sectors has increased, it has increased the most in the tertiary sector. As a result, in the year 2013-14, the tertiary sector has emerged as the largest producing sector in India, replacing the primary sector. Why is the tertiary sector becoming so important in India? There could be several reasons. First, in any country, several services such as hospitals, education institutions, post and telegraph services, police stations, courts, village administrative office, municipal corporations, defense, transport, banks, insurance companies, etc. are required. These can be considered as basic services. In a developing country, the government has to take responsibility for the provision of these services. Second, the development of agriculture and industry leads to the development of services such as transport, trade, storage, and the like, as we have already seen. Greater the development of the primary and secondary sectors, more would be the demand for such services. Third, as income level rise, certain sections of people start demanding many more services like eating out, tourism, shopping, private hospitals, private schools, professional training, etc. You can see this change quite sharply in the cities, especially in big cities. Fourth, over the past decade or so, certain new services such as those based on information and communication technology have become more important and essential. The production of these services has been rising rapidly. In Chapter 4, we shall see examples of these new services and the reason for the expansion. However, you must remember that not all the services sector is growing equally well. Service sector in India employs many different kinds of people. At one end, there are a limited number of services that employ highly skilled and educated workers. At the other end, there are a very large number of workers engaged in services such as small shopkeepers, repair person, transport person, etc. These people barely manage to earn a living, and yet they perform these services because no alternative opportunities for work are available to them. Hence, only a part of this sector is growing in importance. You shall read more about this in next section. Where are the most people employed? Graph 2 presents percentage share of three sectors in GDP. Now you can directly see the changing importance of sectors over the 40 years. A remarkable fact about India is that while there has been a change in share of the three sectors in GDP, a similar shift has not taken place in employment. Graph 3 shows the share of employment in the three sectors in 1977-78, 2017 and 18. The primary sector continues to be the largest employer even now. Why didn't a similar shift out of the primary sector happen in the case of employment? It is because not enough jobs were created in the secondary and tertiary sectors. Even though industrial output or the production of goods went up by more than 9 times during the period, employment in the industry went up by around 3 times. The same applies to the tertiary sector as well. While production in the service sector rose by 14 times, employment in the service sector rose around 5 times. As a result, more than half of the workers in the country are working in the primary sector, mainly in the agriculture, producing only about 1/6 of the GDP. In contrast to this, the secondary and tertiary sector produce the rest of the produce, whereas they employ less, about half the people. Does this mean that the workers in agriculture are not producing as much as they could? What it means is that there are more people in agriculture than is necessary. So even if you move a few people out, production will not be affected. In other words, workers in the agriculture sector are underemployed. For instance, take the case of a smaller farmer, Lakshmi, owning about 2 hectares of unirrigated land dependent only on rain and growing crops like jowar and arhar. All 5 members of a family work in the plot throughout the year. Why? They have nowhere else to go for work. You will see that everyone is working. None remains idle, but in actual fact, their labor effort gets divided. Each one is doing some work, but no one is fully employed. This is the situation of underemployment, where people are apparently working, but all of them are made to work less than their potential. This kind of underemployment is hidden in contrast to someone who does not have a job and is clearly visible as unemployed. Hence, it is also called distinguished unemployment. Now, supposing a landlord, Sukram, comes and hires one or two members of the family to work on his land. Lakshmi's family is now able to earn some extra income through wages. Since you do not need 5 people to look after that small plot, 2 people moving out does not affect production on their farm. In the above example, 2 people may move to work in a factory. Once again, the earning of the family would increase and they would also continue to produce as much from their land. There are lakhs of farmers like Lakshmi in India. This means that even if we remove a lot of people from agricultural sector and provide them with proper work elsewhere, agricultural production will not suffer. The income of the people who take up other work would increase the total family income. This underemployment can also happen in other sectors. For example, there are thousands of casual workers in the service sector in urban areas who search for daily employment. They are employed as painters, plumbers, repair persons and others doing odd jobs. Many of them don't find work every day. Similarly, we see other people of the service sector on the street pushing a cart or selling something where they may spend the whole day but earn very little. They are doing this work because they do not have better opportunities. How to create more employment? From the above discussion, we can see that there continues to be considerable underemployment in agriculture. There are also people who are not employed at all. In what ways can one increase employment for people? Let us look at some of them. Take the case of Lakshmi with her 2 hectares of plot of unirrigated land. The government can spend some money or banks can provide a loan to construct a well for her family to irrigate the land. Lakshmi will then be able to irrigate her land and take a second crop, wheat, during Rabi season. Let us suppose that 1 hectare of wheat can provide employment to 2 people for 50 days, including sowing, watering, fertilizer, application and harvesting. So 2 more members of the family can be employed in her own field. Now suppose a new dam is constructed and canals are dug to irrigate many such farms. This could lead to a lot of employment generation within the agricultural sector itself, reducing the problem of underemployment. Now suppose Lakshmi and other farmers produce much more than before. They would also need to sell some of this. For this they may be required to transport their products to a nearby town. If the government invests some money in transportation and storage of crops or makes better rural roads so that mini trucks reach everywhere, several farmers like Lakshmi who now have access to water can continue to grow and sell these crops. This activity can provide productive employment to not just farmers but also others such as those in services like transport or trade. Lakshmi's need is not confined to water alone. To cultivate the land, she also needs seeds, fertilizers, agricultural equipments and pump sets to draw water. Being a poor farmer, she cannot afford many of these, so she will have to borrow money from moneylenders and pay a high rate of interest. If the local bank gives her credit at a reasonable rate of interest, she will be able to buy all these in time and cultivate her land. This means that along with water, we also need to provide cheap agricultural credit to the farmers. For farming to improve, we will look at some of these needs in Chapter 3, Money and Credit. Another way by which we can tackle this problem is to identify, promote and locate industries and services in semi-rural areas where a large number of people may be employed. For instance, suppose many farmers decide to grow arhar and chickpea, pulse crops. Setting up a dal mill to procure and process these and sell in the cities is one such example. Opening a cold storage could give an opportunity for farmers to store their products like potatoes and onions and sell them when the price is good. In villages near forest areas, we can start honey collection centers where farmers can come and sell wild honey. It is also possible to set up industries that process vegetables and agricultural produce like potato, sweet potato, rice, wheat, tomato, fruits which can be sold in outside markets. This will provide employment in industries located in semi-rural areas and not necessarily in large urban centers. Do you think that in India, about 60% of the population belongs to the age group 5 to 29 years? Out of this, only about 51% are attending educational institutions. The rest, and particularly those aged less than 18 years, may be at home, or many of them may be working as child laborers. If these children are to attend schools, we will require more buildings, more teachers, and other staff. A study conducted by the erstwhile Planning Commission, now known as Niti Aayog, estimates that nearly 20 lakh jobs can be created in the education sector alone. Similarly, if we are to improve the health situation, we need many more doctors, nurses, health workers, etc. to work in rural areas. These are some ways by which jobs would be created, and we would also be able to address the important aspects of development talked about in Chapter 1. Every state or region has potential for increasing the income and employment for people in that area. It could be tourism or regional craft, industry, or new services like IT. Some of these would require proper planning and support from the government. For example, the same study by the Planning Commission says that if tourism as a sector is improved, every year we can give additional employment to more than 35 lakh people. We must realize that some of the suggestions discussed above would take a long time to implement. For the short term, we need some quick measures. Recognizing this, the central government in India made a law implementing the right to work in about 625 districts of India. It is called Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005. Under MGNREGA 2005, all those who are able to and are in need of work in rural areas are guaranteed 100 days of employment in a year by the government. If the government fails in its duty to provide employment, it will give unemployment allowance to the people. The types of work that would in future help to increase the production from land will be given preference under the Act. Division of sectors as organized and unorganized. Let us examine another way of classifying activities in the economy. This looks at the way people are employed. What are the conditions of work? Are there any rules and regulations that are followed as regards their employment? Kanta. Kanta works in an office. She attends her office from 9:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. She gets her salary regularly at the end of every month. In addition to the salary, she also gets provident fund as per rules laid down by the government. She also gets medical and other allowances. Kanta does not go to office on Sundays. This is a paid holiday. When she joined work, she was given an appointment letter stating all the terms and conditions of work. Now Kamal. Kamal is Kanta's neighbor. He is a daily wage laborer in a nearby grocery shop. He goes to the shop at 7:30 in the morning and works till 8 p.m. in the evening. He gets no other allowances apart from his wages. He is not paid for the days he does not work. He has therefore no leave or paid holidays. Nor was he given any formal letter saying that he has been employed in the shop. He can be asked to leave anytime by his employer. So do you see the difference in the conditions of work between Kanta and Kamal? Kanta works in the organized sector. Organized sector covers those enterprises or places of work where the terms of employment are regular and therefore people has assured work. They are registered by the government and have to follow its rules and regulations which are given in various laws such as the Factories Act, Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Gratuity Act, Shops and Establishment Act, etc. It is called organized because it has some formal process and procedures. Some of these people may not be employed by anyone but may work on their own, but they too have a register themselves with the government and follow the rules and regulations. Workers in the organized sector enjoy security of employment. They are expected to work only a fixed number of hours. If they work more, they have to be paid overtime by the employer. They also get several other benefits from the employers. What are these benefits? They get paid leave, payment during holidays, provident fund, gratuity, etc. They are supposed to get medical benefits, and under the laws, the factory manager has to ensure facilities like drinking water and a safe working environment. When they retire, these workers get pension as well. In contrast, Kamal works in unorganized sector. The unorganized sector is characterized by small and scattered units which are largely outside the control of government. There are rules and regulations, but these are not followed. Jobs here are low paid and often not regular. There is no provision for overtime, paid leave, holidays, leave due to sickness, etc. Employment is not secure. People can be asked to leave without any reason. When there is less work, such as during some seasons, some people may be asked to leave. A lot also depends on the whims of the employer. This sector includes a large number of people who are employed on their own doing small jobs, such as selling on the street or doing repair work. Similarly, farmers work on their own and hire laborers as and when they require. How to protect workers in the unorganized sector? The organized sector offers jobs that are most sought after, but the employment opportunities in the organized sector have been expanding very slowly. It is also common to find many organized sector enterprises in unorganized sector. They adopt such strategies to evade taxes and refuse to follow laws that protect laborers. As a result, a large number of workers are forced to enter the unorganized sector jobs which pay a very low salary. They are often exploited and not paid a fair wage. Their earnings are low and not regular. These jobs are not secure and have no other benefits. Since the 1990s, it is also common to see a large number of workers losing their jobs in the organized sector. These workers are forced to take up jobs in unorganized sector with the low earnings. Hence, besides the need for more work, there is also a need for protection and support for the workers in the unorganized sector. Who are these vulnerable people who need protection? In the rural areas, unorganized sector mostly comprise of landless agricultural laborers, small and marginal farmers, sharecroppers and artisans such as weavers, blacksmiths, carpenters and goldsmiths. Nearly 80% of rural households in India are in small and marginal farmer category. These farmers need to be supported through adequate facility for timely delivery of seeds, agricultural inputs, credit storage facilities and marketing outlets. In the urban areas, unorganized sector comprises mainly of workers in small-scale industry, casual workers in the construction trade and transport etc., and those who work as street vendors, head load workers, garment makers, rack pickers etc. Small-scale industry also needs government support for procuring raw material and marketing of output. The casual workers in the both rural and urban areas need to be protected. We also find that majority of workers from scheduled castes, tribes and backward communities find themselves in the unorganized sector. Besides getting the irregular and low paid works, these workers also face social discrimination. Protection and support to the unorganized sector workers is thus necessary for both economic and social development. Another way of classifying economic activities into sectors could be on the basis of who owns assets and is responsible for delivery of services. In the public sector, the government owns most of the assets and provides all the services. In the private sector, ownership of assets and delivery of services is in the hands of private individuals or companies. Railways or post office is an example of public sector, whereas companies like Tata Iron and Steel Company Limited, which is TISCO, and Reliance Industries are privately owned. Activities in the private sector are guided by the motive to earn profits. To get such services, we have to pay money to these individuals and companies. The purpose of the public sector is not just to earn profits. Governments raise money through taxes and other ways to meet expenses on the services rendered by it. Modern day government spends on a whole range of activities. What are these activities? Why do governments spend on such activities? Let us find out. There are several things needed by the society as a whole, but which the private sector will not provide at a reasonable cost. Why? Some of these need spending large sums of money which is beyond the capacity of private sector. Also, collecting money from thousands of people who use these facilities is not easy. Even if they do provide these things, they would charge a high rate of their use. For example, our construction of roads, bridges, railways, harbours, generating electricity, providing irrigation through dams, etc. Thus, governments have to undertake such heavy spending and ensure that these facilities are available for everyone. There are some activities which the government has to support. The private sector may not continue their production or business unless government encourages it. For example, selling electricity at the cost of generation may push up the cost of production of goods in many industries. Many units, especially small-scale units, might have to shut down. Government here steps in producing and supplying electricity at the rates which these industries can afford. Government has to bear part of the cost. Similarly, the government in India buys wheat and rice from farmers at a fair price. This it stores in its godowns and sells at a lower price to consumer through ration shops. You have read about this in the chapter on food security in class 9. The government has to bear some of the cost. In this way, the government supports both farmers and consumers. There are a large number of activities which are the primary responsibility of the government. The government must spend on these. Providing health and education facility for all is one example. We have discussed some of these issues in first chapter. Running proper schools and providing quality education, particularly elementary education, is the duty of government. India's size of illiterate population is one of the largest in the world. Similarly, we know that nearly half of India's children are malnutritioned and a quarter of them are critically ill. We have read about infant mortality rate. The infant mortality rate of Odisha, which is 40, Madhya Pradesh is 48, is higher than some of the poorest regions of the world. Government also needs to pay attention to aspects of human development such as availability of safe drinking water, housing facilities for the poor, and food and nutrition. It is also the duty of the government to take care of the poorest and most ignored regions of the country through increased spending in such areas. Summing up, in this chapter we have looked at ways of classifying economic activities into some meaningful groups. One way of doing this is to examine whether the activity relates to the primary, secondary or tertiary sectors. The data for India for the last 30 years shows that while goods and services produced in the tertiary sector contribute the most to GDP, the employment remains in the primary sector. We have also seen what all can be done for increasing employment opportunities in the country. Another classification is to consider whether people are working in organized or unorganized sectors. Most of the people are working in the unorganized sectors and protection is necessary for them. We also looked at the differences between private and public activities and why is it important for public activities to focus on certain areas. Thank you.